Hi, it's Mark from dinghdavits.com. Today we're going to show you how to install our Hydrolift davit on this 4788 Bayliner pilot house. In the kit, boxed up, this is what you're going to get. Comes with the hydraulic unit. These are for bunks. This may come separate depending on the length of your bunks. These ones here we're going to be using longer bunks, so we're not going to be using this. And these are the transom supports. We are going to take a look and decide where we want this, lay it out, and then we're going to drill some holes. Alright, so now we've laid out where we want the davit on the boat. What I did here is I marked the top side of the platform, made sure there's no obstructions on the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount these flush with the outside of the platform. There is a curvature to this platform, so we made sure that we were actually in line with the boat and not the actual curvature of the deck. The issue with that is when you bolt it down, there's a little lip here, so there's a profile, and obviously you can't mount that there because this is in the way. So we're going to make it that profile here, and we're going to cut that, so when we can mount it down, the bottom of this here will be flush down here. So I'm just going to use a little cardboard template, go down there, cut that profile out of it, transfer it onto this, and then cut it with a saw. What we're going to use for a saw is just basic wood saw, circular saw, and WD-40 for lubrication, and it will cut like butter. So we'll get on that and we'll get back to you. Alright, so now we've laid out where we're going to set up the spacers. We do need spacers on this boat because that davit needs to be installed at waterline or around 4 inches above waterline, somewhere in that range. In this boat here we're going to end up about 2 inches above the waterline. So we're going to use a spacer. The spacer is going to bring the distance down. Let's see if I get this here for you. We cut the edge so it curls around the platform, and that's going to bring the davit down to about that level, as you can see here. And then we're going to mount the davit to this. We're going to bolt it to the spacer. The davit itself should be mounted fairly flush with the edge of the platform. If you're using spacers, you can get away with having it in a little bit further in, not a lot. But if you mount it inwards, when it tries to go up, the arm is going to hit the platform, so it should be mounted flush. There is a curve to this platform, so this one's going to protrude a little bit further than this one, but we took an account for that. Alright, so now we have our two spacers. We're going to decide where we want to put these bolts to bolt the davit itself to it. So we're going to set the davit up on top of this, take a look at it. We decided 2.5 inches in will give us enough clearance so we can still twist on a nut and have a bolt stick through. So that's it here. I did a little pilot hole. I'm going to drill these two before I mount this to the platform, and then we're going to lift the davit in place, put those two bolts through, and then I'm going to drill these two last holes after the fact. That way there, if you're out a 1/16 of an inch, you're not sort of reaming your holes to get them closer. It'll basically be a perfect fit from the two bolts on the back side, but we'll show you that when we get to that. Alright, we've measured out our spacers, drilled the holes, mounted them where they need to be. Got two of them in. I did drill my two front holes here, and now we're going to transfer that to our location on our davit. Put those two front holes in, and then we'll drill those back holes in at the same time. This is a test fit right now, so we're going to take the bolts out. We're going to seal everything with 5200, reassemble this permanently. On the bolts themselves, we are going to use never seize. The reason we use never seize on stainless steel is because when you start tightening those nuts, sometimes stainless steel gets really gummy and it'll weld itself together to the point where you can never get it off and you have to grind the bolt off. So this is 3M 5200. You could also use 4200. This is our anti-seize, never seize. It comes with different names. We're going to butter up the bolt on there. You don't have to go too crazy with this, but just put a strip all the way along it. Try not to butter up your fingers like I just did. And drop her in there. What you want is that bead to go all the way around, and then you're gonna wash that with a cloth after, wipe off the excess. Alright, so now we have our spacers put in place. We drilled the front hole, put a bolt in there loosely. We drilled the matching holes on our davit. We didn't drill the back holes. I'm going to do that after the davit's on there. It just makes it easier in case you're out a fraction. It just won't go, obviously, because it has to be perfect. So you could drill them both at the same time. So now we're just going to lift this in place, pop it up, put the nuts on there, and we should be moving along here pretty good. It is now 2:12. We've been at this for 2 hours, and this is where we're at so far. But it's coming along. This is kind of the most difficult thing you have to do, because you have to figure out where you want it and not make any mistakes when you're drilling holes. So here we go. All right, we've now lifted the davit in place, put our 2 front bolts in. So now we're going to move on to the back side, and we're going to drill our holes on both sides and then bolt those through, and then we're going to be done with the install of the main body. Then we're going to move on to the transom support. These davits here, there's nothing holding these arms on here right now. Like, you can grab this and slide it right off. The only thing that holds this from sliding off is when you bolt it in. So you can see there's no pin on this here. So this could slide right off if it wasn't bolted. So once it's bolted together, everything's captured, and the end pieces here are captured by the bunks when you screw the bunks on. So when you're measuring everything, make sure everything's snapped in. You know, it's not half slid off, because you're going to get some measurements that are wonky. I believe we were getting 28.25 from outside edge to outside edge, and these are 19 inches long. But take a look at your davit, make sure you measure, and make sure it makes sense. The pin, in case you're wondering why it doesn't walk its way all the way out, it's captured by this screw here, and the cylinder is captured by this screw. So if you ever needed to change a cylinder, all you gotta do is take this one screw out, and the cylinder slides out. Take that pin out, the cotter pin out, and you can actually swap cylinders without taking the whole davit apart. All right, so now we've bolted the davit on. Cylinder's in place. Just holding it at the right height. So we measured from the water line out to here, and the distance from here to here is 12 inches for our customer. So you need to know, or you should know, or hopefully know, the draft of your dinghy. Ideally, you want your dinghy to be able to slide over these bunks just barely. That'll give you the amount of drop that you need, and then the maximum amount of lift. The davit itself travels 32 inches. So now that we have that distance set where we want it, we're going to move on to the transom support. In the kit, there's 2 bars like this here. They come in 4-foot lengths, so they're longer than you most likely will need. If you do need longer ones, we'll help you out with that. So we're going to measure from here to our transom mount, and then we're going to drill 2 half-inch holes, that distance that we need, and we'll just cut the end of the bar shorter, and that'll make our pole exactly where we want it. So we just finished measuring our brace. Basically grabbed this, make sure it was parallel, bolted it down, measured center line of that bolt. Center line of this bolt comes out to exactly 33 inches. So we've now drilled our support. Our center to center was 33 inches. We drilled these holes here a half-inch center line away from the edge, at least about a 1/4 inch wall on each side. That's plenty, since all the weight's being pushed onto the shaft that way. Once we get that in, then we'll be able to mount our block where we want it, and then we'll grab another measurement from this top hole up to here, and that's going to give us basically like a swim platform support. So this is going to support the weight of the dinghy, and this is going to stop the davit from trying to pull your platform off. Without that brace, all the weight would be hanging off your platform, but now we're getting to transfer it onto the transom, so now it's trying to curl it around kind of in this motion here. Makes it a lot stronger. All right, now we've got my upper support in. So now it's time to move this, to mount this block on here. What I did was pop it in place, and I pre-drilled the 4 holes, 3/16 for these 1/4 inch bolts, and now they're ready to go in. What we're going to do now is put 5200 all around here around the bolts, and then we're going to screw everything into the transom, and then that'll be it for this assembly here. All right, so we have our transom support in, 5200 bolted on, all those bolts are tight. We're ready to start running our hydraulic lines. What I like to do is grab the lower hydraulic line, so this is going to be the up line, follow it down to the end, grab the end, and then mark it, so then you know when you're in the engine room which one's which. Not crucial that you do this, it's just that you might push the button, it might go the wrong direction, have to take the hoses off, they're dripping hydraulic fluid, just more work. So mark it, makes it easier. There's a heat shrink tubing that comes in the kit. You're going to want to slide that over the tubes before you put this through your transom. So I'll just start off by doing that, slide them on there so you don't forget. And then there's this nifty little block here. You're going to mount that ideally above the water line. In this boat here, I believe it's going to be somewhere in this area. We'll go check on the inside to make sure this makes sense. And then we're going to run our, this is set up to accept a 1-inch hole saw. So we're going to cut our 2 1-inch holes and run our hydraulic lines into our boat that way. All right, so we now have installed our through water fitting. It's bolted on, sealed. I have not drilled the holes yet. They are a guide for a 1-inch hole saw, so we're going to use the 1-inch hole saw now and drill through the transom. If the transom's too thick, what we're going to end up doing is the 1-inch hole saw has a 1/4-inch pilot. We're going to drill as far as we can, and for whatever reason the platform's too thick, we're going to grab a 1/4-inch drill, go all the way through the other side, and then that'll give us a pilot for the hole saw from the backside if we need to, but I don't think we're going to have to. There's our 1-inch hole saw drilled through. Already drilled it, of course. Then we're going to grab our lines, feed our lines through. There you go. And then heat shrink tube is going to go over like that. We're going to shrink it on, of course, and that's going to give us a good watertight seal. Ideally, this should be above the water line. If it has to be below water line, I would not leave this like this. Definitely caulk this, seal this 100%. Don't just rely on the heat shrink. And then, of course, we're going to route our lines up, tie wrap them, and they're not going to be dangling like that. They're going to be full in the engine room. I'll show you that once we get that all clamped up and done. Now we're all set up, got everything tie wrapped in place. That thing's super tight. There's a little bit of wiggle room everywhere. And now we're gonna just grab our heat gun and we're gonna shrink those on all the way around. And then we're gonna be into installing the pump on the inside. Everything's pretty much done in the back. Still gotta screw down our bunks, but other than that, we're ready to go. All right, so we got a heat trunk on. I added some tie wraps while it was still nice and warm and mushy. And now it's cooling off, and as it cools off more and more, it becomes more and more rigid. So there we go. Now we're ready to go inside and install the hydraulic unit. All right, so we have the hydraulic pump in here. The line that was at the bottom of the cylinder that we marked with a marker goes on this side here. And then we got our 2 power lines hooked up. The negative goes to this terminal here. The positive goes to this other terminal right here. And that's about it. Everything's wired in. It's pretty simple when it comes to the pump. The customer is going to use kind of like a battery tie down strap and strap it down. There's a couple different options. Underneath here, there's 2 3/8 bolts as well. So if you want to bolt it to a wooden platform and then screw that down, that's another option as well to fasten it. All right, so we're ready to fasten our bunks. What I did here is marked where the bunk needed to be lengthwise, so the dinghy was centered with my mothership. And then I just marked the 2 holes, drilled those 2. I'm going to line up the 2 holes here. Again, these bunks, there's nothing holding it in. See, there's a small gap there. You can actually bump that in like that. So make sure they're tight. Drop your 2 bolts in here, and then from here you can go and mark your other 2 holes, drill them, put 1 bolt in at a time as you're drilling them. And then if you want, you can take that rail off and just mirror image with the other rail, sit them on top of each other, drill through both, and then bolt it all up. I'll show you that once we get it all bolted on. So we've now drilled our holes in the first rail. What we did is we grabbed the other rail and we're just going to line them up end for end so these are equal, obviously, and then we're going to use those holes to pilot the 2 other holes to make it a little bit easier on us. And then we're ready to bolt those on. Here we go. The little controller, little sleeve so you could accidentally push anything, is in the water. Done, and then I